evening, everyone. Welcome to the Carolina Weather Group. We're happy to have you this evening, and we are joined tonight by Dr. Justin Sharpe. He is with the Cooperative Institute of Severe Weather and High Impact Weather Research and Operations out at the Weather Center at Norman, Oklahoma, where NOAA and the Storm Prediction Center, National Weather Service, all of those offices. We've talked about the Weather Center before. So that's where Justin is stationed. And tonight we're going to be talking about tornadoes. And there's a new project out called Tornado Tales, talking about your experiences with tornadoes. And tonight we're wanting to learn about this new program and see how it can apply to the general public and how you can contribute to some of the research being done as well. So Justin, we appreciate you joining us tonight and happy to have you. I'm really excited to hear about this project. I saw the press release a couple of weeks ago and I was like, man, we've got to discuss this. So first of all, before we kind of get into the project, kind of a first time guest question that we always ask everyone is kind of introduce yourself and tell us how you really got into this weather community. I mean, we all have our stories, so we would like to hear about your story. How did you get so involved in weather?
Yeah, so that's interesting. So my PhD was at King's College London, and I did that in disaster risk reduction. And I actually looked at transformative learning in disaster risk reduction, which, sounds very flowery, but basically it's, what sort of learning transforms people. And what I did is I went out to California and I studied community emergency response teams and a Spanish language version of those called Listos. And I looked at to what extent they could transform themselves, their lives, and also their preparedness towards a range of different hazards. So earthquakes, tsunamis, fire, you name it, all of those things that you get out in California. So I finished my PhD in 2018. I did some work for the UN Disasters Agency for 6 months. I did some lecturing, but I hadn't nailed down that job, right, where, you've got a little bit of permanence. And it's, it's always a little bit tricky when you've finished your PhD. You're not sure whether even your PhD is going to be worth anything, whether anyone's going to hire you. And I literally found out about this job here on Twitter. A friend of mine who works in a Washington think tank said, "Hey, Justin, have you seen this job opportunity?" And I went, no, I haven't. And so I looked into it, and it wasn't CIWRO then, as you've said at the beginning. It was another cooperative institute, which we've transformed from and into since then, called SIMS. And so I had an interview. It was online because I was in London, and then they offered me the job and I had to get spun up, and I came out here. And my first job was looking at epidemiology of tornadoes. So I had a kind of a bit of a grim start. My first 3 to 6 months was literally looking at all the different fatalities, all the literature on the fatalities, and actually doing a great big meta-analysis of those to find out what we might be missing. And it was actually doing that I realized that we're missing something really obvious. And the really obvious thing was that tornadoes are really survivable, even in one of the worst recent tornadoes, which I would say would be Joplin, Missouri. I think we'd worked the figures out at 98.8% of the people exposed, i.e. underneath the tornado as it went through Joplin, Missouri, survived. And although those that lost their life is a tragedy, it shows how infinite and survivable tornadoes are, even at that EF5 scale. And so these are, I got more and more into this. And so I work now in the Behavioural Insights Unit, which is, within the Cooperative Institute and associated with the National Severe Storms Laboratory. And that's really, really useful because it means I get to, be in that academic world, but also be in the practical world and actually seeing how research transforms into operations. And one of the things that I've been really, really keen on is taking our research back into the community and seeing what they do with it and what they feel about it. So thinking about what people feel that they can and they can't do when a warning is issued, what sheltering options they have, what sheltering options they don't have, and why, and whether we need to start addressing those. So we can unpack this a little bit more as things goes on. But I think that tells me a little bit about my my background. I think the other thing is 2004 tsunami in the Indian Ocean. I was working in a high school in England. I was a geography teacher teaching 11 to 18-year-olds, and I raised money to buy a seismogram, measures earthquakes, and we measured that earthquake that was a teleseismic event, went around the world, and we measured it. And then I started explaining to students and then to wider communities, about it, and that got the attention of the United Nations, who then got me to write a little report that went in a document about how you teach about and learn about these sorts of hazards. And that's really how I then got into the academic world. So I've come at it from kind of a couple of different ways, really. But the other thing is this, I've said it before, weather impacts our daily lives. We talk about the weather, we share our stories about the weather, good and bad. And so, it's integral to who we are as human beings. That environment is incredibly important to us all.
Let's talk about the Tornado Tales of the project. You're talking about, social science and how we as meteorologists, how we as the weather enterprise can better communicate to people who are listening or people who are following the weather or trying to get information. So that's a big thing that the weather enterprise is still. We've been working on it. It seems like since April of 2011 with the storm in Birmingham, the Tuscaloosa tornado, and then Joplin. Then we have tornadoes in Moore, Oklahoma. And so social science has really been a big thing that we've been trying to work on and see how we can better communicate threats of tornadoes. So tell us about this program, Citizen Science. So that means everyone can be involved. Kind of tell us about the details and the goal of what you all are trying to accomplish.
I think really you've got to start with a tiny bit of background here. So there's around about 1,000 tornadoes impacting communities across the United States every year. So if you have an average of about 44,000 households impacted and approximately 2 to 3 people per household, that gives us around about 111,000 people who are exposed to tornadoes each year. But very little is known about how individuals receive, interpret, and respond to the information that they get, such as, through tornado watches and tornado warnings. And in fact, only a small sample of tornadoes has ever been studied. And most often those are only the largest tornadoes. So that was going back to the Joplin tornadoes and the Moore ones and the Oklahoma City ones and the Tuscaloosa ones that you just talked about. What we needed was generalizable information on the tornado warning response after real world events. And so this is, as you say, a citizen science tool. It's an online tool that provides a way for people to anonymously report their tornado experiences. So it asks basic information about what they did in the watch and the warning, where they were, what sort of structure they were in, whether they took shelter, where they took shelter. And I think that it's really important to look at both the watch and the warning, right? Because most people know that warning means I've got to be in my safe space. I need to be really paying attention. But the warning can be over this really long time period. It can be a day, half a day, a couple of hours beforehand. So how much attention are people paying in those timescales? And are they preparing that? Are they using it as an opportunity to go, right, I need to make sure that my safe space is cleared out, wherever that safe space is. Or I need to make sure that I know that I can get to shelter and that the car is running and it's gassed up if I'm going to another place. Because the other thing is not everyone's shelter's in place. We have sort of make this assumption that, everyone, well, not everyone, but many people live in permanent site-built homes. But we know that 50% of all fatalities occur in mobile manufactured homes. And it's good that and right that we say, get out, leave those structures. They are not safe. But where are they going? And how are we as a society saying, yeah, you can get out, but now you need to work out where you're going. Doing that in the warning, that's too late, right? People need to be thinking about this ahead of time. And so there are things going on across the Southeast. So Alabama has passed something called the Safer Places Law, which they passed about a year ago. And the idea of that is that churches, businesses, etc., might be able to offer themselves open as shelters during these events for these people who are most vulnerable in our society. And the whole point of the law is kind of almost like a Good Samaritan law. So if something happened, people wouldn't be suing and things like that. So to give those people protections as well. And I guess really what we get with this is, my gosh, is this a complex issue or what? And this is my job. This is my job, is trying to make sense of all of these complexities and not say that I've got all the answers. And I think that's what's really key about this Tornado Tales, is that hopefully that will give us some answers that we don't know or we're not expecting, or maybe it reaffirms we're doing exactly the right things. As time goes on, what we're hoping is different markets, different areas of the country might feel differently or may use different sheltering options. What are they? If we know those things can be transmitted to those local media markets and those broadcast meteorologists, and they can be giving really localized preparedness kind of advice rather than the more generalized preparedness advice that we get now. And again, we're talking about this being over a long time period. I would like this to be running for a good 10 years. And what we can hope to do is report out every year or so. This is what we found this year. This is what happened here. That's what's happening here. And share this with other scientists as well. We're not sort of taking this all for ourselves. We will be sharing this with other scientists, with other social scientists, with broadcast meteorologists, with other people in the weather enterprise, because it's really important. And most importantly, the public, because, you know, they're the ones that we're asking for their opinions, their experiences. And I think the last thing to mention here is we are collecting data about how people felt. Did they feel safe? Because I think that's really important. And that's something that I think that I got from the USGS is, did you feel it at, which is what inspired me to do this in the first place. I got a question a couple of years ago at a conference and I couldn't answer it. And I was like, and it wasn't specifically about this, but it made me think hard. And then I was like, hang on, why do we not have, do we have this? So I had to do some research first and go, maybe this exists already. Maybe I don't want to be doing something that someone's already done, but no one had done it. And then it took 2 years to bring to this stage right here. And that's partially because it's a NOAA product. That means the government is collecting this. That has to go through incredibly strict procedures through the Office of Management and Budget. And I also made sure that when we were doing this, we weren't collecting private identifiable information, because I wanted people to have trust in this, that this is an anonymous product, which means they have faith that they can give us their information, and, you know, we're not going to be, you know, trying to use that for anything else. And, you know, we don't ask people for names. Sometimes people give us names. We've stripped that out if we were sharing that information with people. Do you know what I mean? So that we know that Bob at so-and-so address is not giving away all of his secrets about what he did and what he didn't do.
Maybe elaborate a little bit on some of the differences that you see with nocturnal tornadoes to the Midwest towards the northern Gulf states versus the Southeast region. Like where are the risks higher in some of these areas, and what sort of what times of the year folks should be looking for tornado activity in the nighttime hours, right?
So I think one part of this is that nocturnal tornadoes, when are they occurring? Well, actually, they can occur at any time of year. And I think we're seeing this more. And I think actually that's an incredibly important thing to get out to the public. So I've been working, one of my other parts of what I do is I've been working with Mississippi, Alabama Sea Grant. So do you remember right at the top of the program, I was talking about, you know, how we want to hear from the public. So we've got a project going there, which is really literally outreach and education. And, you know, we've even got a 6-hour program of readiness for severe weather. But one of the things we did, I'm going to hold this up. I'm going to tell me if you can see it. There you go. Tornadoes can and do happen at night. But then, were you ready for the magic, people? So if I turn that, have several ways to receive warnings. So we produce this as a team working closely with Mississippi, Alabama Sea Grant and some very talented kind of graphic people here at the National Severe Storms Laboratory to produce this lenticular magnet. And there's a reason that we wanted to do this. One, I wanted a fridge magnet. If you give someone a leaflet or a piece of cardboard or a postcard, it kind of gets buried underneath stuff on the kitchen table, right? People just kind of don't pick it up again and maybe go, what was that? Whatever, and they throw it away. You want something like this, boom, goes on your fridge. You can walk past it every day. Kids like it because they can play with it. But the idea is to get that message out that tornadoes can and do happen at night, and to have those multiple ways of receiving messages there. And that is really key to what you were talking about in terms of survival rates, in terms of impact on people, and in terms of the risks. If you are increasing the ways that you can get alerts, you are decreasing your risks, because maybe you'll be ahead of the game, as we were talking about maybe in the watch. And then the other thing that is to come back to in terms of like nocturnal tornadoes is, you know, I've seen a lot more stories of late where people have done the right thing and they've tried to do the right thing. But what I also know from my own research and from going down to talking with people in those communities in Arkansas and Kentucky and Tennessee is that people knew in some cases 90 minutes that this thing was coming towards them. It was, you know, a series of long track tornadoes that just went on and on and on. It was, you know, I think it was the second kind of longest or, sort of events in history in terms of that we've recorded anyway. People knew it was coming down the pipe. They knew in Kentucky, they knew in Tennessee what was happening and pretty much when. And that really is partially to do with what the weather service were doing. It was partially to do with what the broadcast meteorologists were communicating to folk. The worst thing that I see, and when I talk to some people in out of Mayfield, Kentucky, it was like, they just didn't have a choice of shelter. There was no shelter open for them. They didn't have a basement, and they're there and they're praying. And my job is this: I don't want to feel people that prayer is their only course of action. I'm not saying that prayer is not a good course of action, but it shouldn't be your only course of action when these storms occur. And so this is very much about understanding that entire continuum of the watch and the warning phases, including at night time, and then have people got sheltering options that they can go to. And this is one of the things that really drives my research. So I hope that unpacks it a little bit more. It's the risk is very much about whether people have places to go, whether they get the information, and whether they take that seriously. My research more recently has shown almost everyone I talked to took this seriously. No one went, you know what, I just went out on the porch. That story you often get, I like to go out on the porch and just watch them. That's great if you live out in the country somewhere and you can see for 30 miles, and maybe that's an exciting thing to do. But when it's in a city and you can't see and it's nighttime, I think that amps up the feelings about that and being scared about that and not knowing which direction it's coming from. And I think that this is where the broadcast meteorologists do such a really great job of gap filling that knowledge. You know what I mean? You can follow along on your phone if the TV goes down or something like that. So, that to say, we're still learning, we're still wanting to learn, but I think the messaging communication has got better and better.
Going forward, where do you think we're best focusing our future efforts? Do we need to keep working on advanced preparation or telling people to focus on that? Do we need to focus on better shelters? Basically, I guess if you had a bunch of grant money that you were in control of distributing, where would you want it to go?
It's always complex. I think it's going to be a combination. I think it is right that it's a combination as well. And it's right that maybe, local authorities, local government are working with a whole range of stakeholders to try and work out what works for them. So it's not about me dictating what should happen locally, because I don't live there locally. I don't know enough about the situations, about a whole range of things. And this is something that I think is really important. This is why we're going out to the communities with the Sea Grant, sort of teaming up with the Mississippi-Alabama Sea Grant, is to learn from those communities. Are we missing something? Is there something we just haven't heard before? And I think what's really important here, Frank, is this power dynamic. So, you think about it, as a research scientist, you kind of almost in a bit of more of a position of power. And what I don't want to do is go in, parachute into, communities, kind of talk to them, disappear, write up my great scientific paper that benefits me, and that benefit doesn't go back to the communities. I think that's one thing we're trying to avoid, that extractive research. So, that's really my answer. We need to understand more by going into the communities. We need to talk to them more. And I think that in answer to your question, if I had that pot of gold or pot of money or whatever it was, it really would probably be a combination, but that combination wouldn't be distributed just how I thought it, but how those local governments are best suited to do so in concert with their community groups, with their religious groups, with their, with the general public, and with mobile manufactured home owners. And just returning to that for a second, one thing to kind of make sure is that not everyone lives on, say, mobile manufactured home parks. So in the Southeast in particular, what happens is people tend to live in rural areas and they have that on a bit of land. They bought a bit of land, and what's the cheapest thing that you can put on a bit of land? It's a mobile manufactured home. But is that necessarily the safest thing as time goes on? Perhaps not. So again, there's that another layer of complexity, because we've got that rurality there as well. And that means also those people are maybe a long distance away from emergency rooms or, those sorts of things. So if they are impacted by a tornado coming through and they are severely injured, it takes them longer to get to hospital, and then maybe that increases the risk of fatality or more serious injury.
What was sort of the biggest culture shock for you when you moved to America and to Oklahoma from Great Britain?
So I'm a Londoner. I'm from London. Like I said earlier, I studied in London. I lived in London. I've worked in London. And one thing about London is public transport. It is everywhere. So I've got a little Brompton bicycle. I don't know what one of those, if you know what one of those are, they're a little tiny bicycle that folds up into three. I can cycle to the station. I can get on a train with that bicycle. I can get across to Tower Hill Embankment. I don't know if you've ever been to London and seen Tower Bridge, but where I lived in Upminster in East London, that's you'd get on a train, the C2C, across to there, and then you could pick up a tube or what we call the underground train, or you could cycle along the River Thames to like King's College London, and I love that. And then I came out here, and I don't drive. I drive a motorcycle, but I don't drive a car. Man, was that a culture shock. I had to get Ubers absolutely everywhere for the first few months. And you know, I had to save up and then, you know, buy a motor scooter, which I now use. My family and I invested in, and I say invested, we bought a G20 Chevy van from 1994. So that this is a red thing that we cruise around in with the seats that do this. So, you know, because it's like being in a cinema seat. So, yeah, that was the biggest culture shock for me. And, you know, America lives on its wheels is a kind of a phrase. And it really hit home that. It really did.
So what's your favorite thing about, say, the cuisine in Oklahoma and comparing that to what you would find back in the UK?
And people don't judge me. I'm vegetarian, pescatarian. I don't eat meat, right? So they do some incredible Impossible burgers out here that you couldn't get in London at the time. There's a place down here called the Garage Norman, and they do this mushroom Swiss burger, which is amazing. Like, it is a proper American burger experience. And the Impossible meat now is kind of getting really close to what meat is like with texture and everything and taste. And yeah, man, honestly, you're making me hungry now thinking about that. But yeah, really, if an Impossible burger is done really well, and I've had the really good Impossible onion burgers as well, because that's a thing out in Oklahoma, the onion burger. Right, so I'm sure, again, yes. Please don't get offended. Like, I'm not knocking. If you eat meat, you go for it. I'm not judging anyone in any way, but I'm vegetarian, so I go for those Impossible. Yeah, they are so good out here. Honestly, genuinely, absolutely amazing. Oh, and I've found a real love for the Dairy Queen as well. So that's an interesting one. My favorite is the mochaccino blizzard with like Oreo cookies in. Only a small one, but wow. Yeah.
Have you been to visit the Climbers yet? If so, where, or what's a place you want to?
So, see, that's a really interesting question. Sort of have and I haven't, but I did buy a fridge magnet, because if I go to a state, I buy a fridge magnet. Apart from randomly, so please send in your fridge magnets from the following states. So I got a fridge magnet from Arkansas. I didn't get one from Tennessee, Kentucky, or Missouri. I went through the boot hill of Missouri, and we touched on Ohio as well at one point. So we crossed the Mississippi and the other rivers as you're going up through there, which I found really exciting. And I usually get fridge magnets from places. So I've got one from Harvard, because we were up at the AMS in Boston a few years back. I've been to California, but I need to get a fridge magnet, and I've not done that yet. I went to an integrated warning team meeting back in December 2019 in Clanton, Alabama, and we went through Charlotte Airport. So, and now I bet everyone knows this, the rocking chairs in the airport there. So like everyone was sat there. So I think my work colleague was love this as well. And that was really great. And I think, bizarrely enough, that was the first time I tasted an Impossible Burger Whopper from the airport there in the Burger King, and got super excited, because I hadn't even been in the US that long at that point, only a couple of months. So suppose
one of us gets called over to visit the London area for a conference. Say there's something happening at the ECMWF, and we're going to fly into Heathrow, or we're a Panthers fan and we're going to see them play at Wembley next season. Oh yeah, like that.
Yeah.
Suppose that. What is the thing that we should do while we're there, and what's one place we should go to eat? if you had to pick just one?
In terms of a place to visit, a very and free museum is just around the corner from Holborn Station, and it's called the Sir John Soames Museum. Sir John Soames was an architect who was the architect of the current Bank of England as it is now, and many other buildings as well. He left his estate and his house and all of its items to the country in perpetuity, which is Latin for forever, by an act of Parliament. And it is a tiny, tiny museum. It is a Georgian house, so you get this beautiful experience of being in a Georgian house. It's free to go in, and he collected curios and architectural pieces from across the world. He's also got paintings by Hogarth of the Rake's Progress, which is a story of destitution and gin in the 1700s, which is amazing to see. And they're hidden in these panels in this room. And if you ask the people who, are curators at the museum, they will it was like some weird secret room behind a secret room. It is not on many tourist maps, but would be a fantastic place to go. And when I was at King's and we had visitors from Turkey and Italy and things like that, I'd take them there because it was so random, a little bit different, right? So I think that's the main thing. Eating, oh my gosh, that is very, very, very difficult question, because it's so multicultural in London. But what I would say is this: to have a authentic English multicultural experience, I would go to Brick Lane in East London. Liverpool Street is the closest tube station or underground station. And there you can go to a place called Brick Lane. And on Brick Lane, there are a series of restaurants there. And they're all Indian restaurants and Bangladeshi restaurants. So that is one place to go. For me, I perhaps wouldn't go there. I go to a place called Green Street, which is near the old West Ham Football Club. And that has South Asian food, which is all vegetarian and is amazing again as well. I don't know what your tolerance is for curry, but you can get mild curries all the way through to incredibly hot curries. But honestly, genuinely a great experience, because that is the real mesh of our multiculturalism within the United Kingdom. And that's one place for it. There are others, of course. That's the problem with London. It's so huge.
If you wanted to give out any promotional stuff for your social media or how folks can find Tornado Tales, what's the best way they can do that?
You can Google Tornado Tales NOAA, NOAA, and that should come up in the search engines there. And you'll see news stories about it as well. So that's a really useful thing to do. I'm on Twitter at, my handle is at edu for DRR, so EDU, the number 4 DRR. That's just my personal one. This is not an organizational one at all. And I generally use that to tweet about natural hazards, disasters from across the range of things, not just hydrometeorological ones, but earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic hazards, those sorts of things, because it really is something that drives me and I'm really, really interested in. Please take part in the Citizen Science web survey if you can, and if you are experienced. Oh, and the other thing that I forgot to say is that this could be used for historic tornadoes as well. So this isn't just like if something occurs tomorrow. This might be that you were in a big tornado, several years back. This survey can take those and record those, and these are also really useful for us as scientists to learn from those older events as well. So just something for perhaps your listeners or viewers to kind of consider. So yeah, that's it really. I genuinely hope that this has been useful for you all. I've enjoyed myself, and I'm happy to do one of these again if you would like that. If you'd like to have me on.
Awesome. We would love that. And for our folks who are listening or watching, after these big severe weather events that we cover here, we'll be sure to push out the Tornado Tales website. That way you guys can document what you experience, and you'll be helping out Justin and other folks who go through these experiences. So Justin, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you all for watching us here on the Carolina Weather Group and listening to us. Be sure, if you've not already, to hit the like or subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform or here on YouTube. and you'll get the latest notifications when we have new shows that come out. So until next time, we hope you have a great evening, and we'll see you back here soon on the Carolina Weather Group.